Your child's been told they have an attention problem. Maybe they got the ADHD label at school. Maybe their teacher's sending home notes every week. Maybe you've been told to consider medication and something in you just doesn't feel right about that. Or maybe you haven't gotten a label yet, but you're watching your kid struggle to sit still, to focus, to finish a single task, and you're trying to figure it all out and figure out why. I want to offer you a different framework today than you've heard before, not a different label, a different lens. Because in my practice, I see kids every single week who have been told they have an attention problem, and what they actually have is a nervous system that never learned how to regulate itself. And that distinction changes everything about what the solution looks like. I'm Dr. Steve Lako with Lako Family Chiropractic in Roswell, Georgia, and I work with children from infancy through the school years whose parents came in exactly where you are right now. They're searching for answers, wanting to help their children out without just medicating the symptom. Today, we're going to talk about focus, attention, and dysregulation in kids, what's actually happening neurologically, why it so often gets misidentified, and what parents can do about it. Let's start with what ADHD actually describes, because I think most parents don't fully understand what the diagnosis means and what it doesn't. ADHD is a description of behaviors, inattention, impulsivity, hyperactivity, observed in a child over time in multiple settings beyond what's expected for their age. What it does not tell you is why those behaviors exist. It doesn't tell you what's happening in the nervous system. It doesn't tell you what the root cause is. It tells you what the child is doing and then gives that pattern a name. And the default response to that name is almost always medication, which can help some kids short term. I'm not dismissing that, but medication manages symptoms. It doesn't address the underlying system that's producing them. And for many families, especially families where something in them says there has to be more to this, that's not enough. Here's what I want you to understand about focus and attention from a neurological standpoint. The ability to focus, to sit still, to filter out distraction, to stay on task is not a personality trait. It's a function of the nervous system. Specifically, it's a function of how well the brain can regulate its own state. Can it shift into a calm, focused mode when the situation calls for it? Can it filter out sensory input that isn't relevant? Can it transition from one task to another without getting stuck or flooded? A well-regulated nervous system can do all of those things. Not perfectly, kids are kids, but consistently enough. A dysregulated nervous system cannot. And here's the key. A dysregulated nervous system isn't dysregulated because the child is choosing to misbehave. It's dysregulated because it never built the capacity to regulate in the first place. Think of the nervous system like a thermostat. In a healthy system, the thermostat reads the environment and adjusts accordingly. Too stimulated? Dial it down. Too sluggish? Ramp it up. If the system self-corrects. In a dysregulated nervous system, one that's been under chronic stress starting as early as birth, the thermostat is miscalibrated. It gets stuck in overdrive, and a child whose nervous system is in chronic overdrive looks exactly like what we call ADHD. They can't sit still because their body's flooded with stress chemistry and movement is the only release valve. They can't focus because their brain is scanning for threats instead of engaging with the lesson. They're impulsive because the part of the brain that pumps the brakes, the prefrontal cortex, is frequently offline. This is not a behavior problem. This is a regulation problem. I want to take a step back and talk about where dysregulation begins because it often starts much earlier than most parents realize. The nervous system begins developing in utero and is profoundly shaped by the birth process itself. A difficult delivery, prolonged labor, vacuum or forceps assistance, emergency C-section, planned C-section creates significant physical stress on a newborn's head and neck, specifically on the upper cervical spine where the brainstem sits. The brainstem is the control center for the body's stress response. When there's tension or misalignment at that level, the nervous system can get locked into a state of chronic activation, that fight or flight, from day one. And a nervous system that starts life in fight or flight often stays there. It builds on that foundation. It develops patterns of hypervigilance, reactivity, and difficulty transitioning between states. By the time that child reaches school age and a teacher notices they can't sit still, the pattern's been there for years in the making. and it's just now visible in a setting that demands regulation. I want to give you a concrete picture of what this looks like because it's easy to miss when you're in the middle of it. It looks like a child who is bright, genuinely bright, but cannot perform consistently, who has great days and terrible days with no obvious explanation for the difference. It looks like a child who can focus intensely on things they love, video games, Legos, sports, but completely falls apart when asked to sit and do homework. And the parents think if they can focus on that, they can focus on anything. But that's not how the nervous system works. High interest tasks provide their own regulation. Low stimulation tasks require the nervous system to self-regulate. And that's exactly what this child can't do. It looks like a child who melts down when they're tired, they're hungry, or overstimulated, at a level that seems extreme for their age, who ramps up instead of winding down, who goes from 0 to 100 in a second. It looks like a child who's exhausted by the school day in a way their peers aren't, because they're working twice as hard just to hold it together, and they're using every bit of self-regulation they have just to get through the classroom. By the time they get home, there's nothing left. Does that sound like your child? When a child comes into our practice with attention and focus concerns, the first thing we do is not look at behavior, but we look at the nervous system. We assess how the spine is functioning, how the nervous system inside that spine is functioning, where there's tension, where there's interference, where the communication between the brain and the body is being disrupted. We look at the autonomic nervous system, the balance between the sympathetic stress response and the parasympathetic rest and regulate response. And through gentle, specific chiropractic care, we help the nervous system find its baseline. We help it build the capacity to self-regulate, not from the outside in, not by medicating the brain, but from the inside out by removing the interference that's been holding the system in overdrive. What parents describe after their child begins care follows a pattern. The first thing they usually notice is sleep. Huge. Their child starts sleeping more deeply, waking up more rested, and that matters because a rested nervous system regulates far better than any exhausted one. Then they notice the recovery time after meltdowns shortening. The child goes from being stuck in dysregulation for an hour to coming back to baseline in 15 minutes, then 5. Then they notice the homework battles getting lighter, the mornings getting smoother, the teacher sending home different notes. We didn't fix their child, we helped the child's nervous system do what it was always designed to do. If your child's been labeled or struggling, or you just feel like there has to be more to this than what you've been told, I want you to know there are answers and there is help. Come see us at Lako Family Chiropractic in Roswell, Georgia. We are here for the kids who don't fit the mold, for the parents who are still searching, for the families who deserve more than a label and prescription. The link to book a consultation is in our description below. And if this video put words to something you felt for a long time, share it with a parent who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next video.